A bus driver's ordinary morning turns into a nightmare when a wealthy teenager's cruel prank nearly causes a fatal accident. But what happens next will leave you speechless. A hero emerges from the passengers, a phone call changes everything, and a shocking connection is revealed that transforms punishment into something far more profound. This is a story about respect, sacrifice, and the invisible threads that connect our lives in ways we never imagined. Chapter 1. The Morning Route. Margaret Hayes had driven the number 47 bus route for 23 years. Every crack in the pavement, every pothole, every stop sign existed in her muscle memory like notes in a familiar song. She was 52 years old, widow for 12 years, mother to one son who'd made her prouder than she'd ever thought possible. The pre-dawn darkness was lifting as she completed her pre-trip inspection. Check the mirrors, test the brakes, walk the perimeter. These rituals kept people safe. Margaret treated them like sacred obligations. The number 47 cut through the city like a social experiment. It started in Riverside Heights, where houses had gates and 3-car garages. It ended in Westbrook, where Margaret lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment that she kept immaculately clean despite the building's age. Rich and poor shared her bus every day. Most treated each other with quiet civility. Some didn't even look up from their phones long enough to notice each other existed. Margaret noticed everyone. The elderly woman who struggled with the steps. The young mother with 2 kids and a stroller. The construction workers heading to early shifts. The business executives checking stock prices on tablets. She greeted them all the same way, with respect, with dignity. Because Margaret Hayes believed in something that seemed old-fashioned now, that every job done well mattered, that driving people safely to their destinations was noble work, that treating others with kindness wasn't weakness, it was strength. Her son David had learned that from her. He'd grown up watching his mother leave before sunrise, come home exhausted, and never once complain. He'd learned that honor wasn't about what you did, but how you did it. David was overseas now, military, deployed somewhere he couldn't tell her about. She kept his last letter in her pocket, read it during her lunch break, touched the paper like a talisman. He'd be home eventually. She just had to be patient. Margaret pulled out of the depot at 5:47 a.m., exactly on schedule. The sky was turning purple at the edges. Another day, another route, another opportunity to do her job well. She had no idea this morning would change everything. Chapter 2. The Troublemaker Boards. Brandon Mitchell stepped onto the bus at the Riverside Heights stop with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. 16 years old, designer everything. Phone in one hand, expensive iced coffee in the other. 2 friends trailing behind him like satellites orbiting a planet. Margaret saw him and felt the subtle shift in atmosphere that trouble always brought. "Morning," she said pleasantly. Brandon looked at her like she was furniture. He swiped his student pass, his father's money loaded onto plastic, and headed toward the back without responding. His friends, Jason and Kyle, at least nodded. They looked uncomfortable already. Margaret had seen kids like Brandon before. Not often, but enough to recognize the type. Entitled, bored, constantly seeking validation through manufactured drama that they could post online. She watched in the wide mirror as Brandon sprawled across 2 seats, legs stretched into the aisle. A violation of basic courtesy. She said nothing. Pick your battles. That was survival in public service. More passengers boarded, a nurse finishing a night shift, an older gentleman with a cane, a young woman with headphones, lost in music, and one more, a man in his 40s wearing casual clothes, carrying a gym bag. He took a seat near the front, pulled out a book. Something about him was different. The way he scanned the bus, the way he positioned himself with clear sight lines. Margaret registered it unconsciously. 23 years of driving taught you to read people. The bus pulled away from the curb. Morning traffic was building. Margaret navigated it with practiced ease. In the back, Brandon was getting louder. "This bus smells like poverty," he announced to his friends, loud enough for everyone to hear. "My dad's car has better air conditioning than this whole vehicle." Jason shifted uncomfortably. "Dude, chill." "What?" "I'm just being honest." Brandon pulled out his phone, started filming. "Day in the life of slumming it with regular people. This is content, bro." He panned the camera around, capturing tired passengers trying to ignore him. "And here we have our driver," Brandon said, zooming in on Margaret's reflection in the wide mirror. "How much you think she makes? Minimum wage? Can't be much more. Look at that uniform. Probably been wearing it since the 90s. Margaret's jaw tightened. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel a fraction harder, but she said nothing. Don't engage. Don't give him what he wants. The man with the gym bag looked up from his book. His eyes tracked to the mirror, to Brandon, back to his book. But he wasn't reading anymore. I should tip her, Brandon continued, his voice dripping with false generosity. Like when you tip the help at a restaurant. She probably needs it. Bet she's got like 7 kids at home. Kyle leaned over. Man, you're being kinda harsh? I'm being real, Brandon shot back. Not my fault the truth hurts. The bus stopped at a red light. Margaret took a slow breath. 4 more stops, until these kids got off at Sterling Academy. 4 more stops of patience. Behind her, Brandon stood up, started walking toward the front while the bus was still moving. Excuse me, miss, he called out, his tone mocking. Miss Bus Driver, I have a question. Margaret didn't turn around. Please return to your seat while the vehicle is in motion. Oh, she speaks, Brandon laughed. I was wondering if you could actually talk or if you just, existed to turn the wheel. The light turned green. Margaret accelerated smoothly, ignoring him. Brandon got closer. Close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with teenage arrogance. I asked you a question, he said, his voice harder now. And I asked you to sit down, Margaret replied, keeping her eyes on the road. It's a safety regulation. Safety regulation? Brandon mimicked in a high-pitched voice. His friends weren't laughing anymore. Other passengers were watching now, some with anger, some with pity, none willing to intervene. The man with the gym bag closed his book completely. Brandon raised his phone, filming Margaret's profile. This is how they treat customers now. Total disrespect. I'm going to show this to... Young man, Margaret said, her voice still calm but with steel underneath. You will sit down now, or I will pull over and call my supervisor. Or what? Brandon challenged. You'll kick me off? My dad will sue this whole bus company. He's Lawrence Mitchell. Maybe you've heard of him? Mitchell Properties? Worth like 20 million? I don't care if your father owns the moon, Margaret said quietly. You will follow the rules on my bus. Something shifted in Brandon's expression. Anger. Real anger mixed with wounded ego. He looked down at the iced coffee in his hand. The bus was approaching an intersection. Traffic was heavy. Pedestrians waited to cross. Brandon smiled. It was not a nice smile. Here's what I think of your rules, he said, and then he threw the entire drink directly into Margaret's face. Chapter 3. Split seconds. The world exploded into chaos. Cold liquid hit Margaret's eyes. Blinded her. The coffee was sweet, thick, sticky. She couldn't see. His hands instinctively moved toward the steering wheel. The bus swerved. Passengers screamed. Margaret's training kicked in through pure muscle memory. She couldn't see, but she knew where the brake was. She stomped down, hard. The bus lurched, skidded. Horns blared from other vehicles. Someone shouted. A child cried. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously. Margaret wiped frantically at her eyes with one hand while fighting to control the vehicle with the other. The bus was still moving, still dangerous, still carrying 37 people whose lives depended on her regaining control. She found the brake again, pressed harder. The bus shuddered to a stop. They were diagonal across the lane. Other cars had swerved around them. No collision, no injuries, no disaster. But it had been close. Terrifyingly close. Margaret sat frozen, coffee dripping down her face, her uniform soaked, her hands shaking on the wheel. Behind her, Brandon was laughing, recording, his phone camera capturing everything. Oh man, that was perfect, he crowed. Did you see her face? This is going to get 1 million views! Jason and Kyle were pale. They weren't laughing. No one else on the bus was making a sound. Shock had rendered them silent. Then someone moved. The man with the gym bag stood up. He walked down the aisle with purpose. His movements were precise, controlled, deliberate. He reached Brandon in 3 seconds. Give me the phone, the man said. His voice was quiet, absolutely calm and utterly commanding. Brandon turned, annoyed. Who the... He stopped when he saw the badge. The man had pulled out his police identification. Detective Shield, captain's rank. I said give me the phone, Captain James Rodriguez repeated. You're under arrest. Chapter 4. Captain Rodriguez. Brandon's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, fear. Then back to arrogance. Arrested? For what? It was just a prank. Assault, Rodriguez said, pulling out handcuffs with practiced ease. Reckless endangerment? Attempted destruction of property? Interfering with public transportation? He paused. I can keep going if you'd like. You can't arrest me. My father... Turn around, hands behind your back. Rodriguez's tone left no room for argument. Other passengers were pulling out their phones now, recording. But these videos would tell a different story than Brandon had planned. Jason stood up, hands raised peacefully. Officer? Look, we didn't know he was going to... You too? Sit down and stay put, Rodriguez ordered. I'll need your statements. He cuffed Brandon efficiently. The teenager's bravado was cracking now. This is insane, Brandon protested. It was a joke. She's fine. Rodriguez stepped closer. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. You threw liquid in the face of a bus driver while she was operating a vehicle carrying 37 people. Children, elderly passengers. You could have killed every single person on this bus. For the first time, Brandon seemed to grasp the magnitude. His face paled. Up front, Margaret was trying to compose herself. A kind elderly woman had given her tissues. The nurse was checking if she needed medical attention. I'm okay, Margaret kept saying, though her voice shook. I'm okay. But she wasn't okay. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Rodriguez called dispatch. This is Captain Rodriguez, badge 4723. I need backup and a supervisor at the intersection of Riverside and Oak. I have a juvenile in custody for assault on a bus operator and public endangerment. He listened to the response, then added, And I need someone to contact David Hayes, service member. Tell him his mother needs him. Margaret's head snapped up. What did you say? Rodriguez met her eyes in the mirror. His expression was unreadable. You're Margaret Hayes, correct? Driver for 23 years? Son deployed overseas? How do you... Margaret's voice trailed off. Your son saved my life, Rodriguez said simply. 3 years ago. Kandahar province. I owe him everything. The bus had gone completely silent. Everyone was listening now. Brandon, still cuffed, looked between them confused. What are you talking about? Your timing, Rodriguez said, turning back to Brandon, is spectacularly bad. David Hayes came home yesterday. Early return from deployment. He was planning to surprise his mother at the end of her shift today. Margaret's breath caught. David's home? He is now, Rodriguez said, pulling out his phone. And he's on his way here. Chapter 5. The Phone Call. The backup arrived within minutes. 2 patrol cars, a transit supervisor, an ambulance, though Margaret insisted she didn't need it. Brandon was placed in the back of a patrol car. His friends gave statements, both clearly terrified of being implicated. Margaret sat on a bench near the bus stop, still shaking, coffee staining her uniform. The supervisor was kind, professional, told her to take the rest of the day off with pay. But Margaret couldn't process any of it. Her mind was stuck on one thing. David was home. David was coming. She hadn't seen her son in 11 months. Video calls weren't the same. She'd missed his face, his voice, his presence. And now he was going to see her like this. Humiliated, attacked, vulnerable. Rodriguez sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. Your son talks about you constantly, he said. Every chance he gets. The sacrifices you made raising him alone, the values you taught him, how you worked double shifts so he could go to college before enlisting. Margaret wiped her eyes. He's a good boy. He's a good man, Rodriguez corrected gently. One of the best I've ever served with, and he became that way because of you. A black SUV pulled up. Emergency lights flashing. Another officer got out, opened the back door. And David Hayes stepped onto the street. He was in dress uniform, taller than Margaret remembered, or maybe she'd just forgotten in the months apart. His face was leaner, harder, marked by experiences she'd never fully understand. Their eyes met. Time stopped. David saw his mother sitting on a bench, her uniform stained, her face blotchy from crying, surrounded by police cars and witnesses. Margaret saw her son, her baby, home and safe and real. They moved simultaneously. Margaret stood. David crossed the distance in seconds. They collided in an embrace that felt like a prayer answered. Margaret sobbed into his shoulder. David held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Because she was. I'm sorry, Margaret kept saying. I'm so sorry you have to see me like this. Mom. No. David's voice cracked. Don't apologize. Don't ever apologize. They stood there, mother and son, while the city moved around them. Traffic flowed. Sirens wailed somewhere distant. Life continued. But in that moment, they were the entire world to each other. Rodriguez gave them space, waited. When they finally separated, David turned to him. "James," David said, gripping Rodriguez's hand, "thank you for calling me." "Always," Rodriguez replied. Then he nodded toward the patrol car where Brandon sat watching through the window. "The kid who did this is in custody. Lawrence Mitchell's son." David's jaw tightened. "The real estate guy?" "Same one. Kid threw a drink in your mother's face while she was driving. Could have killed everyone on that bus." David looked at the patrol car, at Brandon. The teenager looked small now, scared. "I want to talk to him," David said. Rodriguez hesitated. "David, you're too emotionally involved." "5 minutes," David said. "Please." Rodriguez considered, then nodded. "5 minutes. I'll be right there." David walked to the patrol car. Rodriguez opened the door. Brandon looked up at the soldier standing over him. "Who are you?" Brandon asked, trying to sound tough but failing. "I'm her son," David said quietly. "The woman you assaulted. That's my mother." Chapter 6. The Truth in the Parking Lot. Brandon stared at David, at the uniform, at the ribbons and badges that marked him as someone who'd seen things Brandon couldn't imagine. "Look, I'm sorry, okay?" Brandon said, the words hollow. "I didn't mean for it to be such a big deal. It was supposed to be funny." "Funny," David repeated. His voice was soft, dangerous. "You think humiliating a woman who spends her life keeping people safe is funny? She's a bus driver. It's not like..." "It's not like what?" David interrupted. "Not like she matters? Not like she's important?" Brandon fell silent. David crouched down to eye level. "My mother raised me alone after my father died. She worked 60-hour weeks. She drove this route in snow and heat, through exhaustion, through grief. She never missed a day, never complained, never treated a single passenger with anything less than respect." He paused. His voice dropped even lower. "She did that so I could have food, clothes, books, a future. She sacrificed everything so I could become something. And you know what she taught me? That how you treat people, all people, defines who you are." Brandon's eyes were filling with tears now. Real ones. "I've seen combat," David continued. "I've seen what real danger looks like, and you know what terrifies me more than any battlefield? The thought of my mother doing her job, being treated like she's less than human, by someone like you. I didn't know." "That's the problem," David said. "You didn't think she deserved to be known. You saw a service worker, someone beneath you, someone you could use for entertainment." Brandon was crying openly now. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." David stood up. "Tell her, not me, her." He walked away, leaving Brandon in the car with his shame. Chapter 7. Lawrence Mitchell arrives. The third vehicle to arrive was a silver Mercedes. It pulled up aggressively, tires squealing slightly. Lawrence Mitchell emerged like a storm, expensive suit, Italian shoes, the confidence of someone used to solving problems with money and lawyers. "Where's my son?" he demanded, not bothering with introductions. Rodriguez stepped forward. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Captain James Rodriguez. Your son is in custody." "I want him released immediately," Mitchell interrupted. "This is ridiculous. He's 16 years old. Whatever happened, I'm sure we can resolve it without involving the police." "Your son assaulted a bus driver and endangered 37 lives, Rodriguez said calmly. "This is far beyond resolution." Mitchell pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer. This is harassment. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually," a new voice said, "I think you're the one who doesn't understand the situation." David had walked over. He stood in front of Mitchell, still in uniform, his posture military perfect. Mitchell looked him up and down dismissively. "And you are?" "David Hayes. My mother is the woman your son attacked." Something shifted in Mitchell's expression, not quite sympathy, but recognition that this wasn't going to be simple. "Look, soldier, I respect what you do," Mitchell said, his tone trying for diplomatic. "But boys do stupid things. My son made a mistake. I'll make sure your mother is compensated." "Compensated," David repeated. The word tasted bitter. "Yes, whatever damages, medical bills, lost wages. I'll cover it all and add extra for the inconvenience?" "You think this is about money," David said. It wasn't a question. Mitchell spread his hands. "Everything's about money, son. That's how the world works." David stepped closer. He wasn't threatening. He didn't need to be. My mother makes $38,000 a year, David said quietly. She drives that bus with more pride and dignity than some CEOs show running billion-dollar companies. And your son treated her like garbage because he thought she didn't matter. Now wait a minute. You want to write a check? Fine. Write one to the transit authority for the therapy your son's going to need after facing actual consequences. Because that's what's happening here. He broke the law, he endangered lives, and money doesn't erase that. Mitchell looked at his son through the patrol car window. Brandon was still crying. For the first time since arriving, Lawrence Mitchell really looked at the scene, at the other passengers giving statements, at his son's friends, pale and shaken, at Margaret, sitting quiet and dignified despite everything, at the man in military uniform defending his mother with words instead of fists, showing more restraint and character than Mitchell had taught his own son. Mitchell's voice faltered. What happens now? Rodriguez stepped in. Your son will be processed at juvenile detention. He's looking at assault charges, reckless endangerment, and interference with public transportation. Given his age and lack of prior record, he'll likely get probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. And if we fight it? Mitchell asked, though his heart wasn't in it anymore. Then it goes to trial, Rodriguez said, with about 30 witnesses, multiple videos, and a victim who almost crashed a bus full of people because your son thought it would be funny. Mitchell closed his eyes. Can I see him? Rodriguez nodded. Father and son faced each other through the car window. They spoke briefly. Mitchell's face, when he turned back, looked older. He'll cooperate, Mitchell said quietly. No lawyers, no fighting. He'll accept whatever consequences come. David and Rodriguez exchanged glances. That's the right decision, Rodriguez said. Mitchell looked at Margaret. Ma'am, I don't expect you to forgive him, or me, for raising someone who could do this, but I am profoundly sorry. Margaret stood. Her voice when she spoke was steady. Your son is 16, she said. He can still learn, he can still change. I hope this teaches him what you apparently didn't. The words hit harder than any insult could have. Mitchell nodded. He got back in his Mercedes and sat there for a long moment before driving away. Chapter 8. 6 months later. The courtroom was smaller than expected. Judge Martinez presided with the weary wisdom of someone who'd seen too many privileged kids face their first real consequences. Brandon Mitchell stood before her, flanked by his attorney and his father. He looked different, smaller, humbler. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Martinez said, reviewing the file, you pleaded guilty to assault and reckless endangerment. Given your age and lack of prior record, I'm prepared to offer probation with conditions. Do you understand? Probation with conditions. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Brandon said. His voice was quiet. You will complete 200 hours of community service to be performed specifically with the City Transit Authority. You will work as an assistant, cleaning buses, helping passengers, and learning what it means to serve the public. Brandon nodded. You will also complete a victim awareness program and write a formal apology to be published in the local paper, and you will be restricted from all social media platforms for 18 months. I understand, Your Honor. Do you have anything you'd like to say? Brandon looked back at the gallery. Margaret sat there, David beside her. Rodriguez was there too. Moral support. I do, Brandon said, turning back to the judge. What I did was cruel, dangerous, unforgivable. I thought I was better than other people because my family has money. I was wrong. His voice strengthened slightly. Mrs. Hayes could have died because of me. Everyone on that bus could have. And I laughed about it. That's who I was. I'm trying to be different now. I know words aren't enough, but I'm trying. Judge Martinez studied him. Words aren't enough, Mr. Mitchell, but they're a start. I'll be monitoring your progress. If you complete your service successfully, this will be reduced to a misdemeanor on your record. If you fail, we'll be back here discussing juvenile detention. Understood? Yes, Your Honor. Dismissed. Epilogue. The bus stop. 6 months after the sentencing, Margaret was driving the number 47 route. Same bus, same stops, same passengers mostly. But something had changed. More people said good morning now. More people thanked her. Word had spread about what happened, about the teenager who'd learned consequences, about the bus driver who'd handled it all with grace. She pulled up to the Riverside Heights stop. 3 passengers boarded. The last one was Brandon Mitchell. He scanned his pass, looked up, saw Margaret. Their eyes met. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," he said quietly. "Good morning, Brandon," she replied. He took a seat, didn't sprawl, didn't film, just sat respectfully, heading to his community service assignment at the downtown transit center. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was better. It was growth. Margaret continued her route. The sun was rising over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. At home, David was making breakfast before his shift at the Veterans Center. He'd chosen to stay local, be near his mother. They'd both been through enough deployments. Captain Rodriguez was somewhere in the city, keeping people safe, carrying the debt he owed to a young soldier and the mother who'd raised him right. And Brandon Mitchell was learning slowly what his father's money could never teach him, that every person matters, that respect isn't bought, that consequences, when faced honestly, can become the foundation for something better. The bus rolled on. Margaret Hayes drove with the same pride, the same dignity, the same quiet honor she'd always shown. Because some things, the most important things, never change, and that was exactly as it should be,